Great, well, by Star Tribune standards, not great, but a good piece in the Star Tribune front page today. Did Tim Walz let rioters burn down Minneapolis? And as I read it, I had a thought that, man, it was worse than I remember. I think we tend to forget pain. But I think it's a piece that we must parse. We must go through it.
Okay.
Soon after news broke that Walz would join the Democratic ticket, his opponents coalesced on what they see as a major weak spot in his record, his response to the 2020 Minneapolis riots. Well, there's two major weak spots, that and his financial life, which has been horrific for the state of Minnesota. Not his personal. His financial behavior on behalf of the state of Minnesota has been ruinous. We'll get to that.
Okay.
His Republican rival, J.D. Vance, told crowds that Walz let rioters burn down Minneapolis. The soundbite appeared in a new campaign for Trump, cut over footage of rampant fires and looting, followed by more claims on social media that Walz was nowhere to be found during the civil unrest. Walz was a little more than a year into his first term when Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd, and video of the fatal encounter ignited 5 days of protest that evolved into riots. The unrest caused an estimated $500 million in damages to Twin Cities buildings, culminating on May 28 with the torching of the 3rd Precinct Police Station, which is yet to be resolved.
Right.
Walz ultimately imposed a citywide curfew and deployed the Minnesota National Guard. The soldiers and other law enforcement snuffed out most of the violence by May 30. Is that true? I guess so.
Yes. Yeah.
In the 4 years since, politicians have debated whether the Guard should have been deployed earlier and have traded blame as to who was at fault for allowing the situation to get out of control. Through videos, interviews, data requests, city and state investigative reports, and other public documents, the Star Tribune has pieced together a timeline of Walz's response to the riots. It began with the promise to protect the rights of peaceful protesters. Let me stop right there. Was there ever a moment when the protests were peaceful?
No.
Yeah. The 26th, that was the first day they marched from 38th in Chicago, down 38th over to Minnehaha, and then up to the 3rd Precinct. It started, and I would say it was 80 to 90% peaceful. When they got closer to the precinct, they started breaking police car windows. But yeah.
It began with a promise to protect the rights of peaceful protesters, then turned to pleas for them to go home amid destructive demonstrations, and ended with Walz blaming leadership in Minneapolis for their abject failure to suppress heavy looting and arson. Walz did not respond to requests for comment for this story.
Imagine that.
So far, Walz and Harris have been conveniently silent on anything important.
They have not had their feet held to the fire. They've done no press conferences.
Walz held his first press conference about 48 hours after Floyd's death, promising that the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension would investigate the fatal encounter and expressing a desire for a federal civil rights probe. The night before, thousands had marched from the location of Floyd's death to the 3rd Precinct on East Lake Street. The protesters had been mostly peaceful, though some had broken windows at the police station and in squad cars. Minneapolis police responded by shooting rubber-coated bullets and chemical irritants indiscriminately into the crowd without issuing any official dispersal order, and some threw rocks back at them. So I think this is weighted, W-E-I-G-H, this is weighted a bit against the police, or 5 paragraphs into the story.
Yeah,
we're learning that the police fired. What were they supposed to do? Pick out one guy they saw who might have thrown a rock?
And don't forget, frozen bottles of water were being thrown at the police, too.
Walz said he shared the urge of just a primal scream watching the bystander videos, and that protesting is how people express their pain, process strategy, and work to create change. And then he said, I would encourage them to do so with a mask to socially distance, he said. I had forgotten a lot of this.
Yeah.
We certainly don't want to see things turn violent in any way, but I also think this is a normal response.
That's worth talking about, Joe.
Well, it's a normal response. It wasn't, if he's thinking of Tiananmen Square.
In my mind, that's permission to go crazy. It's a normal response. This is what I would expect.
Is it akin to January 6th?
Well, that's a loaded question. I don't know.
It really is I meant it is a loaded question.
Yeah. I can see where the comparisons are made. I can't answer that definitively.
Later that evening, looters broke into a Target store across the street from the precinct. That's that giant Target store on Lake Street, right? Mayor Fry called Walz around 6:30 in the night to ask him to send in the guard. We expressed the seriousness of the situation. The urgency was clear, Fry told the Star Tribune in 2020. He said he would consider it. All right. At 8:13 p.m., Minneapolis Police Chief Madaria Arredondo forwarded an email to Minnesota Public Safety Commissioner John Harrington asking for the guard and providing mission plan details. MPD has expended all available resources, the email said, including assistance from surrounding law enforcement agencies. In other words, the coppers were saying, we're tapped out. We've done everything we can. We don't have any bodies. We need help. All right.
Oh,
yeah.
That night, rioters set ablaze an auto zone across the street from the precinct and destroyed several other buildings. Walz tweeted that the area near the precinct had become extremely dangerous. All right. For everyone's safety, please leave the area and allow firefighters and paramedics to get to the scene. All right.
Why is the governor of the state tweeting when he should be on the 4 news stations we have, pleading and begging and commanding that people stay away? Why is he resorting to social media? How come he's not being more of a leader?
Well, May 28th, the assault on the 3rd Precinct. U.S. General Joseph Lingell of the National Guard warned 2 of the highest-ranking officials at the Pentagon that the situation in Minneapolis was about to get worse. Lingell said the Minnesota National Guard was expecting up to 75,000 people to descend on the city that weekend. In emails to Deputy Secretary of Defense David Norquist and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Mark Milley, or is it Milley?
it's Millie. Yep.
Milley, the Guard had sent 200 military police officers standing by. They are prepared to be armed should MPD and the governor request it, Lingell wrote in emails obtained by the Star Tribune through the Freedom of Information request. State Adjutant General John Jensen followed up an hour later, saying he expected a late afternoon deployment. Walz activated the Guard at 2:30 p.m. and declared a peacetime emergency. The Guard was given missions to support the Minneapolis Fire Department, St. Paul Critical Infrastructure, and State Capitol Complex. Weren't they given a mission to, I guess, by helping the Minneapolis Fire Department, you're addressing the Minneapolis part of this problem. But this problem had spread to St. Paul.
Correct. You're on the 29th here. This was the day where I don't know if you guys remember, late in the afternoon, early evening, they started taking over the freeway. They were on 94 at the tunnel. They were on 35W at the split there in the Commons. They were on 35W over the river. The freeways were being occupied early evening as the sun set and things got dark before things really went crazy.
What was the day Floyd had the knee on his neck? Was that the 20th?
The 25th.
The 25th.
That was the 25th, Monday.
All right.
The 26th was the mostly peaceful protesting, the march.
But 27 and 28, the bleep hit the fan. 29,
Correct.
The bleep hit the fan. hit the
29th, it got bad for St. Paul. Now, I'm reading my tweets from that week. 29th, it got really bad in St. Paul. I believe that's the day that they blocked off the Lake Street Bridge on the St. Paul side and would not let the protesters into St. Paul. And then there was a big, massive protest on University and Snelling, that those malls there and all those stores that were there.
Yeah.
And that's where the St. Paul police really kicked some ass. They really did well and shut everything down.